And so we we formed there, and one back in those days, I don't know. I don't think we had a funeral home in Wyoming at that time yet. We don't have much of one now, but I don't think we even had one then. And when people died, a lot of people, the bodies stayed in the home. Got a casket out there somehow, and the bodies stayed at home, and they put a candle, big stand-up candle over here, and people would sit up with the bodies for. We didn't keep them. I don't imagine they kept them too long because I don't know if they embalmed them somewhere. I just don't know that, but they didn't keep the bodies very long. But the Bonners had a beautiful young girl. She's probably about 17, 18, 19 years old, but she died of some natural causes. I don't recall what it was, but I remember my dad going over there and setting up at night because neighbors would come in and set up during the night with the body. And I don't know why I remember that, but I remember going over there, and that stayed in my mind. When I got to when we were there at on the Belly Place, we stayed there till I was in the 7th grade, and like I said, my mom and dad, my dad farmed with those horses and mules, and he would bring them home at lunch and feed them a little hay and give them water, and they got pretty savvy about that, and they were hard to catch after lunch because they knew they had to go back to work. I mean, they knew that. And my dad would have always a problem getting those horses, putting the collars on them and get them hitched up and get them back out in the field so we could plow or whatever we're doing. So that was always a challenge for my poor dad. He would just have a challenge. And getting back to horse and mules, people back in those days, like I said, this place where we stayed was almost, I would say at least a 3/4 mile off the road. And people would bring a big old trailer, and they would bring horses and mules around, and they would actually try to sell them, to the farmers. And they'd let you take them out and hook them up and try them out and see how good they were, just kind of like driving a car, test drive. And I remember this truck driving up, and this one horse, he was kind of a big gray horse. He kind of stood about a couple of hands higher than most of the other animals in that, or the horses or mules in that particular wagon. And he was a big, strong horse, and I don't know how much my dad paid for him, but he loved that horse, and he said, so him and this guy, they made a deal. My dad bought that horse, and when we'd hitch up that old horse, well, he would hitch up 2 at a time in most cases, and he did most of the pulling, and sometimes we'd put in 4 of them side by side if we had something real heavy to plow deep with. And but I just thought of that story, and that was kind of neat because that's how they did it. They just brought them by, and my dad, we would go to Weimar every Saturday, and sometimes on Wednesday, but it's always every Saturday. And Mom and I'd go to a picture show. I think it was around 8 or 9 cents, and a bag of popcorn was probably about 3 cents. But we'd go to the Palace Theater, and we'd go about early noon or so, and Mom and Dad would do their shopping and things, and then we'd go to the movie that afternoon, later afternoon. And that was the days it was segregated, and the whites, of course, sat on the front floor, on the front part, and the blacks had to go up in the balcony, and they had a separate window for them with a little hole in it. You'd pay, and we went on the other side and went in there, and so we'd go to the movie, and it was always a Western show with Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, or Hopalong Cassidy or something, and they would have a serial each week where we called them serials. They'd last about 3 months or something like that, where something would go on, and right toward the end of the movie, every time this person was just about to be killed, or something was going to happen real bad, so then they'd cut it off, and then you'd have to wait till next week to see how they got out of this thing, you know. So that was kind of our entertainment. And Dad would go down to Juergens and play, Juergens Pool Hall, and play dominoes. And he would drink Pearl beer. And they played straight dominoes. They played partners, 4 people. And the losers would usually have to buy the beer. And anyway, we'd get out of the movie about, I don't know, maybe 9 o'clock, somewhere. It was dark. And Mom would say, well, Jane, you go in there, and our boy, I don't remember, Gene wasn't, I wouldn't call Eugene either, usually boy, go in there. Anyway, because women were strictly forbidden to go in the pool hall. That was a no-no, domino hall. So she'd send me in, and I'd say, Dad, we're out of the picture show now, so Mom was ready to go home. So I'd go out and tell Mom, Dad said they're going to play one more round, and then he's going to come on. And I guess a round would last about 30, 45 minutes. So that would go by, and I'd go back in again, and she'd send me back in and say, Dad, Mom's ready to go home. Well, you tell her we got to finish this game. We got to have one more round. I said, oh, okay. So I'd go back out there. We had an old Model A with curtains on it. It was a roadster, had a little old rumble seat in the back. Mom be sitting in there and waiting. So after about 3 trips, well, Dad would come out, and he wouldn't be drunk. I mean, he could walk up. He walked pretty straight. He did all right, but he'd consumed a few beers, probably 8 or 9 bottles, maybe, I don't know. But he could hold his beer a lot better than I could. So by the time he got to the car, Mama wasn't too happy. So it was kind of a long ride home, and by next day things got back to normal, because we all had our chores to do and work to do. And my dad didn't like for me to come in and pull on his pant leg and say, Dad, I need a nickel, when he was in there drinking sometimes. And so through his wisdom, which was very wise at that time, and I didn't appreciate it, and he probably didn't know what he was probably trying to accomplish either, but so he took me back to the house after I don't know what age I was, but he said, I'm going to give you a cow. You're going to be responsible for that cow. And when you sell that calf, I'm going to open you up a bank account at the First State Bank. I'm going down to Mr. Hager. We're going to open up you a bank account. And I'm going to give you a few turkeys, too. A couple, 3 turkey hens. And he said, you got to be responsible for them. And if you sell a few turkeys, well, you can have that, and we'll put it in your bank. Because turkeys, turkeys are, they're just not very bright. But anyhow, turkeys would they would go out in the woods and bushes and make a little nest, and then they would lay their eggs, and they were very discreet about it. They would try to hide, and they were pretty hard to find sometimes. So my job was to go out and watch them and see where they made their nest, and after they laid about 10, 11, 12 eggs, well, they'd sit on them, and they'd get up and they'd hatch, and little turkeys would come. And so I'd have to watch those turkeys. And so sure enough, when I sold my first calf, well, we went down to the First State Bank, and Mr. Hager, he said, I want to open up a bank account for my boy here. And so that's kind of the way I started having a little money. I sure didn't spend it, because if I'd come asking for money again, I'd be in a heap of trouble, because I just wouldn't do that. So he set up my little bank account. So I had probably a little bank account when I was about 10, 11 years old, I guess. Maybe a little earlier, I don't know, somewhere in that age, around 10. So we had one cow named Rosie, and she was a good milk cow, and I would take her out to the hay meadow in that area, and she'd graze along the fence. I'd put her on a halter, and I'd take her out there and tie her there, so she'd get some real good grass. And it wasn't that much in the pastures, just short grass, and we'd feed them hay, but we treated her pretty good, because she was a good milk cow. And in the evening, well, I'd go get her and walk her back through that hay meadow, and I'd usually just take that rope, and because she's very calm and good, and I'd just take that rope and tie it around my waist and tight, and just walk behind her about 15 feet, and she'd just go right on back over to the cow pens, and I would just walk behind her and just be fine. And so for some reason one day I hadn't gotten myself tied around good yet, or for some reason I didn't have that all tied up good yet. I would just walking with my hands and just pulling back on that rope a little bit, and I don't know if she came across a bumblebee nest or what it was in the hay meadow, because bumblebees would be in the ground. They wouldn't be like honeybees. They were just big old bumblebees. They'd embed in the ground. And I don't know if they stung her or what. I mean, she went wild. I mean, she went berserk. And had I had that rope tied around me, it would have just pulled me in, and she would have dragged me quite a ways around that hay meadow. And that could have been a little bit tragic in those days, as I thought back. And that's one thing that happened. And